The first way you can do this is by avoiding tight-fitting clothes that can identify you with homosexuality. What kind of clothes are we talking about? Some outfits are designed to feminize a man's appearance, as homosexuals try to do, especially displaying the buttocks and genitals. Why? Because it makes it harder to tell the difference between a homosexual and a heterosexual man, making homosexuals blend in. Satan is desperately promoting this perverted practice. It's no exaggeration to say that he's flooded his world with propaganda in favor of homosexuality. Homosexuality is unholy and repugnant to Jehovah, and he will not tolerate it among his dedicated servants. Does your love for Jehovah move you to have the same view? Here at Bethel, we have some of the most outstanding young men in the organization. We are grateful to Jehovah for you and want to commend you for how hard you've worked to meet the high requirements to serve here. There's a particular requirement that Jehovah expects of all who worship him that we want to discuss with you. At 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 16, he says, "You must be holy because I am holy." So, what exactly does it mean to be holy? It means to keep clean before Jehovah and not let sin or the world contaminate us. That's not easy for an imperfect man, but it certainly isn't beyond us either. Jehovah expects us to imitate him to the best of our ability and love what's right and hate what's bad. Bethel is a holy place, but serving here doesn't mean that you're automatically going to remain holy. Satan's world loves practices that Jehovah hates and promotes them as completely normal. Frankly, we might be drawn to some of those things. The question is, what do you have to do to keep yourself clean before Jehovah? If you go to Psalm 119, verse 9, we can find the answer. How can a young man keep his path clean? By keeping on guard according to your word. So, to keep yourself clean or holy in Jehovah's eyes, you have to keep on guard. In other words, make a constant effort. Just like Bethel is clean because we all work at keeping it that way every day, each of us has to daily work at keeping our conduct clean, according to Jehovah's standards in the Bible. If we don't, our service to him will become contaminated and won't please him. But it's not enough to keep on guard just to avoid the bad consequences that come from Jehovah's displeasure. Notice verses 10 and 11 of this same psalm. With my whole heart I seek you. Do not let me stray from your commandments. In my heart I treasure up your sayings so that I may not sin against you. So we keep on guard and avoid disappointing Jehovah because our heart is involved. Our heartfelt love for him moves us to cultivate a deep disgust for what is bad so that we can keep our path clean. The governing body loves you and wants you to experience the great joy that comes from serving Jehovah with a clean conscience. They also want you to avoid the deep pain that comes with sinning against him. That's why we're going to share with you frank and specific counsel related to matters of conduct in two areas. First, your personal habits, and second, your dealings with others. We'll see some dangers you need to keep on guard against in these areas, and then how you can keep your path clean. To begin, let's see 3 ways in which Jehovah's Word helps you to keep your personal habits clean. The first way you can do this is by avoiding tight-fitting clothes that can identify you with homosexuality. What kind of clothes are we talking about? Some outfits are designed to feminize a man's appearance, as homosexuals try to do, especially displaying the buttocks and genitals. Why? Because it makes it harder to tell the difference between a homosexual and a heterosexual man, making homosexuals blend in. So these clothes contribute to changing people's opinion of homosexuality because they come to see it as normal and acceptable. We know that you never intentionally promote that practice, but the question is, how would Jehovah view a man that serves him while dressed in a way that identifies him with homosexuality? Let's read Deuteronomy 22, verse 5, and get his feelings on this. It says, "A woman must not put on the clothing of a man, nor should a man wear the clothing of a woman. For anyone doing so is detestable to Jehovah your God." So, what does Jehovah think of styles of dress that make a man look more feminine? Clearly, this is very displeasing to him. Does the way you dress show that you share his viewpoint? There's another factor to take into account. What effect could your dressing in this way have on your brothers and sisters? These clothes are designed to sexually excite both men and women. Of course, it's not your fault if someone else decides to nurture bad thoughts, but you wouldn't want to spark a wrong desire in others or be responsible for making it harder for them to resist bad thoughts. A second way you need to keep on guard is resisting the unclean habit of masturbation. The God's Love book explains that masturbation is the stroking or rubbing of the genital organs, commonly resulting in an orgasm. So, does a person have to use their hands to masturbate? For example, say a brother wears an undergarment that's so tight it rubs his penis as he moves around. He gets aroused and even ejaculates. Is he masturbating? Yes, he is, because he's deliberately stimulating his genitals, even though he's not using his hands. Does there have to be an orgasm for it to be considered masturbation? Suppose a brother starts rubbing his genitals against a pillow. He gets an erection, but stops before having an orgasm. Is he masturbating? Yes, again, because he's deliberately stimulating himself, whether he has an orgasm or not. How about having an emission of semen at night, maybe even after an erotic dream? Is that masturbation? No. Jehovah made that a part of a man's reproductive system, and it happens without any deliberate stimulation. But even so, when this happens to you, it would be good to examine whether you were dwelling on sexual thoughts before going to sleep. Could you have been sleeping in a position that stimulated you, such as with a blanket or pillow held tightly between your legs? If you're honest with yourself about these matters, it will help you to avoid falling into unclean practices. What effect does masturbation have on a person's sacred service? 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1 explains what Jehovah expects of us. It says, Therefore, since we have these promises, beloved ones, let us cleanse ourselves of every defilement of flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of God. So Jehovah wants us to cleanse ourselves of anything that defiles our spirit. In other words, anything that contaminates our mental attitude. Masturbation contaminates a man with selfishness, it weakens his self-control, and it makes him believe that sex doesn't have to be related to love. It also fills a Christian with guilt. Trying to keep your service to Jehovah holy while under the influence of masturbation is like trying to climb a mountain with a large boulder that you're carrying. Until you free yourself of it, it can only hold you back. What have you done to cultivate a deep disgust for this practice so as to keep yourself clean? Our third point, don't let yourself become contaminated with pornography. Satan's world is in love with it in all its forms. But as you know, pornography in any form is not tolerated at Bethel. What can you do to guard yourself against becoming contaminated with pornography, even by accident? Take precautions to keep yourself as far away from its path as possible. Think of the following situation. While in the bathroom, a brother starts browsing through a list of recommended pictures and videos on a social media app on his phone. He comes across provocative pictures of men or women. Some may be topless and some may be nude. He doesn't tap on them, but he does keep looking and starts to masturbate. Now, did this brother truly stumble upon pornography by accident? Or could it be that he was browsing in a place where he actually hoped to find something sexually arousing? Either way, he needs to examine himself honestly, don't you think? Maybe it would be best for him not to use the internet while isolated from others. What precautions can you take to avoid such a situation? Could certain types of entertainment expose you to the contamination of pornography, even if they're not, strictly speaking, pornographic? Suppose a brother is watching a TV program for mature audiences that contains a sex scene. Now, the scene is shot from an angle so that you can't see the intimate parts of either person. But he replays it several times and gets aroused. Is he keeping himself clean from the influence of pornography? There may not be any visible nudity, but that scene is definitely designed to arouse the person viewing it, and that's why he's viewing it over and over. He needs to work on hating what is bad. What steps do you take to avoid entertainment that could lead you to pornography? Next, we'd like to help you to clearly understand what the Bible means by the phrase sexual immorality, a very serious sin that can quickly destroy your relationship with Jehovah. In the Greek scriptures, that phrase is used to translate the original word porneia. What does that mean exactly? Porneia is sexual relations involving persons not married to each other. It includes acts such as oral sex, anal sex, and masturbating another person. It always involves deliberate manipulation of the genitals and at least one other person or animal. When a Christian commits porneia, the elders always have to provide assistance. Do the genitals of both need to be manipulated for there to be porneia, such as when two people have sexual intercourse? No, both oral sex and anal sex involve the manipulation of the genitals of only one person. Does manipulation of the genitals always involve the use of the hands? Not necessarily. For example, suppose a brother pays a stripper to perform a lap dance that lasts several minutes. She grinds her clothed genitals on his leg while he's fully clothed. He becomes aroused, but doesn't ejaculate. Was that porneia? His genitals aren't being manipulated, and he's not touching the woman's genitals with his hands. However, he is committing porneia by allowing her to use his leg to stimulate her own genitals. What if a person fondles the genitals of another but doesn't actually masturbate them? For example, a brother sits on the lap of one of his male friends. His friend puts his arm around his waist and at one point fondles his crotch over his clothes. Is that porneia? Although the second man didn't go as far as masturbating the first, he is deliberately stimulating his genitals. Because there's fondling, caressing, stroking, or rubbing involved, this act constitutes porneia. What are the following situations? Two brothers masturbate in front of each other, but without touching each other. Is it porneia? The answer is no, since neither is touching the other person. However, it is a flagrant disregard for Jehovah's laws and a serious sin that has to be addressed by the elders. Jehovah hates sexual immorality because it's a misuse of the faculties he created to transmit life. Finally, to keep clean before Jehovah, you have to fight against homosexual behavior. You've surely noticed that we've mentioned several situations involving homosexuality throughout this talk. Why do you think that is? Satan is desperately promoting this perverted practice. It's no exaggeration to say that he's flooded his world with propaganda in favor of homosexuality. It's not realistic to think that you can't be affected by his efforts just because you serve at Bethel. At times, you may find yourself struggling with same-sex desires, or you may realize that others are doing so. That doesn't mean that you or they are homosexuals, but it does mean that you have to keep on guard to remain holy. How can you do this? Examine your conduct carefully and honestly so that you avoid situations that can foster homosexual desires. For example, do you avoid unnecessarily exposing yourself to others, such as when you're in the locker room? Are you always modest, even in front of your roommates? Do you have the habit of excessively touching other brothers, hugging them tightly, slapping their buttocks, rubbing them, giving them massages, and so on? Of course, at Bethel, you may sometimes have to use a community shower, and that means you may not be able to completely avoid being briefly undressed in front of other brothers. In some cultures, it may be acceptable for two men to walk hand in hand, or local customs may permit the use of saunas while unclothed. But if you find yourself struggling with same-sex desires, it would be wise to honestly examine whether you need to make adjustments in your conduct with other brothers. Proverbs 6, verse 27 asks, "Can a man rake fire to his chest and not burn his garments?" The answer is no. Thus, to keep yourself clean from homosexual desires, you cannot put yourself in situations that could bring them to your heart. For instance, what do you think of the following situation? After exercising together, two single brothers go back to shower in a room. Afterwards, one gives the other, who's wearing only a towel, a massage. One or both of them get sexually aroused. They have put themselves in an extremely dangerous situation, don't you agree? Although Satan is waging war to influence people's thinking on the subject of homosexuality, Jehovah hasn't changed his view on the matter. Homosexuality is unholy and repugnant to Jehovah, and he will not tolerate it among his dedicated servants. Does your love for Jehovah move you to have the same view? If you've been involved in unclean or questionable conduct, seek help from the elders right away. We love you and want to help you get on a clean path again. The governing body loves you too. It's our heartfelt prayer that you, our precious young brothers, will keep your path clean and joyfully walk in the law of Jehovah forever.